I'm pretty sure almost everyone watching this video has been waiting to try this character for a very long time. Yep, the character named Velina Airgid can honestly be considered a truly unique agent. Unlike other characters, Velina comes with a brand new attribute called Wind. Now, this new attribute also introduces a brand new effect called Vortex, which creates entirely new combinations with the attributes that already existed before. As you've probably already read from the title of this video, I've been using this character for several days now, and in this video, I'm going to share all of my first impressions about Velina, from my experience using her in combat, her build, and even the teammates that work well with her. So, without wasting any more time, I'm Hoyostation, and we're jumping straight into my full review of Velina Airgid in version 3.0. Let's do this! Alright, before we dive deeper into this character, I want to talk a little about Velina's role. Why do I want to discuss this first? Because I think a lot of people are still confused about what role Velina actually plays. Is she supposed to be a sub DPS or is she actually a main DPS? Honestly, if you take a quick look at her kit, Velina doesn't seem like the kind of character that requires a lot of field time, because most of the time her job is simply to spend energy in order to trigger her special attacks. Because of that, many people might assume that she is going to be a strong sub-DPS for anomaly main DPS characters, such as Promaya, for example. And honestly, if that's what you're thinking, you're not wrong, because Promaya is definitely more suited to being a main DPS than Velina. However, after testing this character through multiple combat stages, I personally feel that Velina is actually quite capable of serving as the main DPS of your team as well. Her damage is high, and top of that, she has large AoE attacks, which becomes one of her biggest strengths. I even compared Velina's damage with Promeya's, and their damage output is surprisingly similar, even though Promaya spends significantly more time on the field. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that if you're currently looking for a solid anomaly main DPS, Velina can absolutely fill that role for your team. You don't have to wait for another character's rerun first, because in the upcoming version 3.0 endgame content, we will start seeing a lot more enemies that are weak to wind, which means you will gain a lot of benefits from having Velina on your account. Alright, after talking at length about Velina's role, I want to share a bit about my experience using her in combat, because I think this is extremely important and something you should definitely know. As I mentioned earlier, Velina is a character with a very simple playstyle mechanically. In fact, I'd even say she's one of the simplest characters I've gotten recently. Once you enter combat, there are really only a few mechanics you need to remember. For example, her EX special attack Wind Shear Purifying Rise. Just like other characters, this skill can only be activated when you have enough energy. When used, Velina step backward before launching a wind attack in front of her. Now here's a little tip for you guys. This skill has an additional effect where it can be activated while avoiding an enemy attack. If you successfully dodge an enemy attack using this skill, you can immediately follow up by pressing the basic attack button to directly perform the 5th basic attack. So honestly, this EX special attack is best used right when an enemy is about to attack you. It's actually quite similar to Promeya's mechanic that I talked about previously. The second skill you need to remember is EX special attack Wind Shear Triple Death Blow. Similar to the previous skill, this one also consumes energy and launches a wind attack forward. However, what you need to remember is that this skill serves as a combo extension of EX Special Attack Purifying Rise. So, if you still have enough energy after using Purifying Rise and press the special attack button again, this skill will trigger. That's why I recommend preparing plenty of energy whenever you want to use her special attacks, so the entire combo chain can go off and maximize your damage output. Finally, the last skill is EX Special Attack Wind Shear Eye of the Storm. This is Velina's signature move. Even though the multiplier doesn't seem as high as the previous skill I mentioned, this attack has an absolutely massive attack range. And what's even cooler is that it can pull nearby enemies toward the center of the storm, making it incredibly effective against large groups of enemies. The only downside is that to use this skill, you will need to pay attention to the special energy bar beneath Velina's icon, called Wind Bloom. You can gain Wind Bloom points by using the EX special attacks I mentioned earlier. Once you've accumulated enough Wind Bloom points, simply hold either the basic attack button or the special attack button to trigger this attack. These three attacks are basically the main abilities you will be using when playing Velina during combat. Pretty simple, right? And because her kit is incredibly straightforward, it leaves plenty of room for you to pair her with another character that requires a lot of field time, such as Promea. In my opinion, Promea is practically the ideal partner for Velina. So if you were lucky enough to pull Promea during Phase 1, don't hesitate to pick up Velina in version 3.0. Why? Because besides utilizing Windswept and Vortex effects, Velina also plays around a Bloom damage, which still has direct synergy with Promea. Promea's core passive increases a Bloom damage, meaning that whenever Promea is present, the team's overall Bloom damage increases, including Velina's Bloom damage. You might be wondering, is Promea the only good teammates for her? Well, I think not really. Velina is actually quite flexible and doesn't strictly require Promea. I also tested Velina together with Aria, and the combination felt perfectly fine as well. Since Aria also revolves around a Bloom damage, their kits still synergize very well together. Alright, let's talk a little bit about Velina's MINDSCAPE. Honestly, if your first question is whether Velina needs MINDSCAPes or not, my answer would be that she's already perfectly fine without any MINDSCAPE upgrades. However, if you're planning to invest in Velina and pull for her MINDSCAPes, I think her M1, Orderly Elegance, is already a very good stopping point. This MINDSCAPE grants additional days, allowing enemies to enter the standard state more quickly even if you're not using Nanggung Yu on the team. On top of that, whenever she triggers Vortex, the effect ignores all attribute resistance on the target, which obviously results in significantly higher damage output. And the part I personally like the most is that M1 also grants a team-wide benefit. Whenever a teammate applies Windswept, 20% of the enemy's wind resistance will be ignored. Just from reading the description, you can already tell how powerful this effect is, and why it's quite worth picking up. I also think some of her other MINDSCAPes are pretty strong. For example, M2 increases the frequency at which Velina triggers Vortex, M4 grants additional attack, and M6 provide extra damage for Windswept. But personally, I still think M1 has the biggest impact overall and is the most worthwhile MINDSCAPE to obtain. Alright, now let's talk about her build. Not only is Velina mechanically simple, but building her is actually pretty straightforward as well. The only annoying part is that she uses a brand new 4-piece draft disc set called Wuthering Salant, which significantly boosts the damage output of wind attribute characters like Velina. So whether you like it or not, you will probably need to farm a proper set for her rather than relying on whatever draft disc you already have sitting in your inventory. For her 2-piece set, you can use a much more common option called Phaeton's Melody, which increases anomaly mastery. This is extremely useful for increasing Velina's anomaly damage. That said, I consider this somewhat optional. If you need additional energy regeneration, you can also run a 2-piece Swing Jazz set, which is one of the more common draft disc sets that's been around since the game launched. The effect is still quite solid. So what about her main stats? Honestly, they're very straightforward. Since Velina functions similarly to most anomaly characters, you will want anomaly proficiency on disc 4, wind damage on disc 5, and energy regeneration on disc 6. You can see the complete setup on your screen. But honestly, one of my biggest concerns regarding this character is the availability of W engines that truly fit her. Why is that? Because Velina is an extremely unique anomaly character. Most anomaly characters typically want W engines that provide high anomaly proficiency or anomaly mastery. Velina, on the other hand, mainly wants energy regeneration in order to maximize her kit. If you take a look at her core passive, energy regeneration becomes incredibly important. the higher your energy regeneration, the higher your damage output becomes. And it doesn't just affect damage. Energy regeneration also influences her anomaly mastery, which directly impacts her anomaly damage. Because of this, her W engine options are somewhat limited. Her signature W engine, Joyao Door, which is specifically designed for Velina, is something I highly recommend pulling for. It provides a massive amount of energy regeneration, grants anomaly proficiency, boosts EX special attack damage, increases both Vortex and Windswept damage, and finally provides an additional anomaly proficiency buff to the entire team. Pretty insane, right? The effect genuinely feels overpowered, which is why I strongly recommend picking up this W engine. So what if you don't have it? Well, that doesn't mean Velina becomes unusable. There are still some alternatives available. One example is the new 4-star W engine called Boisterous Echoes. This W engine provides anomaly proficiency, grants additional energy, and increases your damage output. However, since it doesn't provide energy regeneration as a stat, I recommend using a Disc 6 main stat that increases energy to compensate for this weakness. Now it's time to discuss teammates that work well with Velina. I think this is a very important topic because Velina is a very flexible character who can fill multiple positions. As I mentioned earlier in the video, after testing her extensively, Velina feels like a sub DPS that somehow plays like a main DPS. Even though her gameplay is simple and doesn't have complicated mechanics like some other Zenless Zone 0 characters, her damage output is already on par with many current main DPS units. And even when I use Velina as the main DPS, she still feels smooth and natural to play. That's why choosing the right teammates is extremely important for her. If you're only using Velina as a sub DPS, then a team such as Velina, Velina, and Suna is already an excellent option. Arya can deal incredibly powerful bloom damage, so adding Velina creates a strong synergy, especially if you don't currently have Nangongyu as the stunner in your anomaly team. On the other hand, if you want Velina to serve as your main DPS, then a team consisting of Velina, Bernice, and Yuzua is definitely worth trying. Even though this lineup uses a relatively old-school anomaly composition, I still think it's very effective. I've included several team examples on your screen so you can get a better idea of what kind of team compositions you might end up using if you decide to pull this character. Alright, now let's return to the question I see all the time in the comments section. Is Velina worth pulling in version 3.0? Well, based on my personal experience, I think she is going to be a very interesting addition to Zenless Zone 0. Looking at her mechanics alone, she already stands out because of the new Wind attribute. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, Velina has extremely large range attacks that can pull enemies together, making her especially effective in game modes filled with multiple enemies. If you're currently looking for a flexible anomaly character who can function as either a sub DPS or a main DPS, then Velina could definitely be the answer. That said, if you're asking for my honest opinion, I still haven't found any unique mechanic or gameplay changing feature that truly makes her a must-pull character aside from the new attribute she introduces. When I compare her to other anomaly characters that fulfill a similar role, the differences aren't particularly significant. As of right now, I still consider Velina to be an optional character rather than a mandatory pull. Okay guys, maybe that's all for now. What do you think about Velina? Please leave any comment down below and don't forget to check out my other videos because they are no less cool. Thanks for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video.